Well, hello there, friends. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. On this show, we bring you leaders from across the construction industry, across the United States, every single week to help you lead more effectively. John, you're actually here on the intro. So we normally don't allow guests in the intro, but
I wouldn't either.
Yes.
Particularly with me here.
Well, you're going to have to listen to this ad. This episode is brought to you by the Simple Sales Pipeline. John, if you got salespeople and they're not forecasting consistently with discipline, looking into the future, anticipating sales as we're heading into softer recessionary times, dude, we can solve that. What should you do? Buy an expensive CRM? Cost 6 figures? Take 2 years to implement? Is that what we should do?
Probably not. I'm going to go with no.
Probably not.
On this show.
It's a simple sales pipeline, 30 minutes or less. We can solve that problem, quantify, organize, and value your sales pipeline. All right, John, congratulations. I do believe that's the first time we've ever had a guest involved in an ad.
And probably the last. Did I ruin it for everybody else going forward?
Could be.
That sounds
quite possible.
Right.
All right, so this segment here, because you have promised to come back on the show somewhere between every 4 weeks and every 36 weeks is what I believe.
That's right.
The contract,
that sounds about right.
That's what the contract calls for. And this segment is called Varsity, Sports, and Leadership with Jon Vaughan, where we look through the lens of sports to bring it back to leadership principles to talk about. There are 2 big stories that we've been going back and forth for quite some time. We're going to start with the Indianapolis Colts and the Jeff Saturday situation for any of our Spanish speakers, El Jefe Sábado, right? That's what we're going to talk about here. So, John, maybe just start with the facts of the case, real briefly, of the Jeff Saturday situation.
Facts of the case, Jeff Saturday situation.
Yes.
It's an interesting one. So the I was about to call them Baltimore Colts. I'm not that old. The Indianapolis Colts. They have the head coach Frank Reich. They get into the season. They get 5 or 6 games in. They start going downhill. Yes. The owner, Jim Irsay, gets involved and kind of puts his finger around, hey, we need to get this player out, this player in. It goes further south from there, and they end up firing Frank Reich. Typically, you would go around to either put an assistant in the role, a coordinator in the role, or another head coach that has experience. But no, Jim Irsay goes out and he hires former center and ESPN analyst Jeff Saturday. Yes. As the head coach of one of 32 jobs in the world.
And by the way, what was Jeff Saturday doing in terms of football coaching when he gets this call from Jim Irsay about leading one of the NFL teams? Do you know?
I'm forgetting.
He was coaching the offensive line for a local high school.
That's right.
A local high
I knew
school.
He was a local coach somewhere, but yeah, offensive line.
All right.
Because he had some experience in that.
He did. So I think the most charitable narrative at the time, before things, let's cut to the chase, things went horribly wrong. They got even worse in some remarkably terrible ways that also had terrible luck. It was a debacle. I think the most charitable narrative I heard was, listen, right now, we don't have a scheme problem. We have a culture problem. And Jeff Saturday was here for more than a decade, won a Super Bowl. He was Peyton Manning's favorite center, as far as we know, like whatever. And he said, yes, I understand he maybe lacks the coaching, curriculum vitae. However, dude, he knows people and he knows this organization. We're going to get him in and he's going to be like the CEO. When you heard this, what was the first thing that jumped out to you in terms of like leadership why this probably wasn't going to go well?
2 things hit me pretty instantly. First was the level of disrespect felt by the assistant coaches, yes, the coordinators, anybody else in the coaching profession to say, you know what, you guys have put in the time. You've been through training camps. You've been through two-a-days. You've been through all these tough losses. I think I'm going to go with somebody who's never done any of that.
Right.
And that none of y'all have ever seen or met before because most of y'all probably weren't on the staff when he was playing on this team. That's what hit me first. And then 2 was kind of the narrative around Jim Irsay and whether it's the arrogance, the hubris, or or just whatever it was that made him think that, yeah, I can make this move and everybody's going to think this is great.
Right.
They're going to be all on board. Let's do this.
Well, and just talk about the expectations that would be on Saturday's shoulders to begin with. Not only have you not done this, you're coming in from the outside cold, and now, if you are that remarkable, the expectations are going to be even higher. Like going 500 isn't going to be good enough.
Right.
The other thing that struck me was if I'm an owner and I'm going into the season, especially if the post-Andrew Luck Colts, as they were, have struggled to find a quarterback, have struggled to consistently be, say, better than average, wouldn't you think just a little bit about what would have to be true that during the season, I will fire this guy Frank Reich? That's got to be somewhere on your radar. You would hope for probably half the owners in the NFL. Like, if we start out 0-9, in that eventuality, what would we do and who would we promote? And normally there's someone on the team who knows everybody, who knows the systems. We're going to deal with the grief and whatever that goes with it, but they're going to be an interim coach. This was, you know what I'm going to do? I thought of it. I got it. Hefe Sabado. Bring him in. Let's talk to him. Like, it was obvious. And when he was even like telling the story, he was like, I woke up in my bed one night, looked at my wife. I said, Jeff Saturday, he's the guy. So just the forethought doesn't give a lot of confidence. Then right after, do you know what happened? So they go to like the second offensive coordinator. It's like a quarterback's coach. They go to him and they said, all right, I want you to, you're promoted, offensive coordinator. Do you remember what he said or what he did?
Give me more money and I'll do it.
He said he leveraged it for more money.
Yep.
They being Irsay and the Colts felt offended by this. They said, forget it. You stay down there. They went to the guy who's below him, and he's like, sure.
What do I have to lose?
This is a big jump for me. Meanwhile, another one of their coaches shortly thereafter says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to be an assistant for Stanford.
Who was the head coach at the time at Stanford? David Shaw had already...
Oh, yeah, right, yes. So David Shaw had already left. So he already said, my timeline might be off. But he was leaving... Probably because Stanford, it wasn't very good, and the prospects of them being good, their glory days were behind them, right? Yeah. So this guy's, how bad would it have to be saying, I have one of these roles in an NFL team, there's only 32 of them, I'm going to leave to go to a low Pac-12 team. Half the teams are leaving from there because that's better than this. So I think that just gives an idea of kind of the culture there. Let's talk about Jim Irsay and maybe bring it back to leadership in terms of when there's an overreach from someone who's not involved in the day-to-day, and the reason they have Ballard, what's his name, Greg Ballard? I don't know. Their GM,
right,
who's in the past has been defined as very effective at his job. When the owner comes over and says, Ballard, I got this, and kind of clears everybody out and says, I'm going to make the calls here. Jon, what does that do to the organization as a whole?
Oh, it absolutely just takes it into upheaval because the cornerstone of it has to be trust. And when you're building a team that has to be trust-based, it starts with being able to say, hey, this guy who I've put in this place, I trust him. And then that leads to healthy conversations. It leads to commitment, leads to all the sorts of things that's in that pyramid. But when you come in and you say, I'm taking that trust away, and now I'm taking over, everything else is off the table. Right. Healthy debate stops. Commitment stops. Now everybody's out looking for themselves, for their own results. This guy's looking for the job at Stanford so that he can make. So, I mean, people are jumping off the ship at that point. Right. Mentally, they're quiet quitting, or they're staying and they're figuring out how do I do everything possible so that at the end of this debacle, I've got a job somewhere.
Right. So maybe here's a relevant transition. So at Jon Vaughan, you've hired a new leader to run the organization. He's someone who he wasn't a president of another independent dealer in another state.
Right.
A little bit, right, one removed, you could say. Maybe walk us through kind of the thought process there. And obviously these are wildly different, right?
Almost the exact same. I mean, basically the exact same. But I'll try to compare and contrast them. So
please.
So what I think about with that is that the further away you get from the ground level, the less important that technical and tactical acumen are.
Right.
And so if I've got outside salespeople, they've got to know the process, the customers, the delivery schedule, how's operations doing, what are the job site conditions like? You get to this sales manager, a little bit less than that. The VP of sales, a little bit less than that. So when you get to that president level, like our new president of Jon Vaughan, we've got to understand tactical acumen to some degree, but much more important on the strategic, the big picture, the culture building, the vision casting, all those sorts of things. Where Jeff Saturday is he was too close to the field with not the technical or tactical acumen. Yeah. He was, you look at some of the general managers in all kinds of different sports. Jerry Reinsdorf, who came from baseball, and
right.
Bob Myers, who was an attorney, and all these. They're far enough away that you don't have to have that technical, tactical acumen to be able to be successful in that role. But Jeff Saturday was just so close to it, had never done the job, was offensive line coach for a high school. There's just, it's too close to the field to be able to not be able to have the tools in your toolkit to be able to be successful.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, because one thing we'll often hear as kind of a counterpoint or something that would kind of support the Jeff Saturday hire would be, listen, I very deliberately want someone who's outside. They can see our world with different eyes. They can see it with a different lens. And sometimes you're like, no, that's right. Dave Flitman, right, came from food distribution, right? So there's this argument to be made. And again, I realize these are different, but this is something that we'll hear often, which is, hey, the bug is actually a feature, right? So it's not a negative. It's actually a positive. He's thinking differently. How might you sort through that if you are talking to an executive and they're making a local hire? You're like, I'm not sure their capabilities are going to translate. I understand. And the argument is, well, the reason it's going to work is he's going to look at this completely differently than everybody else because he doesn't know, because this is the way we've always done it.
So there's a piece of it, too, that we didn't talk about with the Colts, which is, what truly was the culture. There has to be, for that to be successful, one, you've got to have a very strong culture that people can have hard conversations, that there's trust there. Second, too, you've got to have a good team around him. You have to have the players. I'm an Atlanta Falcon to my core. Matt Ryan was not the guy for them to be successful. And so if you've got those good parts and pieces around it, a voice from the outside that comes in that fits the culture that's already strong can absolutely work well. But you better have the pieces around it to support it. That leader has to come in and be humble enough to listen to them.
Right.
And so if you've got the players, you've got the culture, and you got that humble leader coming in, I feel like it has the chance to work in our industry to have an outsider work. I could list a handful of examples that have worked really well.
Yeah.
I can also list a handful of examples, present company included, that didn't work so well.
Yeah.
So I just think you got to make sure that the fit is right, the role is right.
Mm-hmm. All right. So maybe there's a tie-in here. So we talked about Jim Irsay and kind of the concerns about leadership overreach, making decisions, doing things that they own the place. Sure, they can, but should they? That answer is no. And the interesting thing about Jim Irsay, his father, who owned the Colts, made the decision to move them from Baltimore to Indianapolis and was known to be an incessant meddler and made it really hard for talented people to want to work with him for any amount of time. I think let's jump off from there. We can go into something saying, when I get into that position, I'm never going to do that. Yeah. And then time passes and you forget what you told yourself and you do exactly what your father did. Is a little bit of fascination there. Let's jump there from father's expectations to another one. I am fascinated by this whole Bronny James story. LeBron's son, who's a senior in high school, extremely talented, not 6'8", 220 like his father was coming out of high school. Very talented, but LeBron last February, so February of 2022, was quoted in an athletic piece. He said, "My last year will be played with my son." And so he kind of made that proclamation. So the idea is his last year, LeBron's actually, when his contract's up with the Lakers, he can go anywhere. And the idea is, wherever I'm going to go, wherever, whoever drafts Bronny we're going to play together. Kind of the Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr. moment, except in basketball.
Except for the reverse, because Ken Griffey Jr. was the GOAT and Sr. was a very solid player.
Yes. No, good call. So I'm fascinated by this because there's this ripple effect where he has not chosen a university yet. He is very good. He is not one of the top 20. What I've heard is not 30, probably the top 40. So now there's this thing where these coaches are thinking, if this circus rolls to town and Bronny already has NIL deals, name, image, and likeness, he's already a multimillionaire on his own. By the way, his family's worth $1 billion. So if anyone was entitled and literally had a title, it would be this kid. And I'm just fascinated why LeBron would go and put that on his son when his son doesn't control that. He's 6'3", which in the NBA means you're tiny.
Tiny.
You're a little guy.
It's Trey Young.
Right.
It's Ice Trey.
We think Trey's like this big.
Yeah.
He's adorable.
Pocket-sized.
Right? Steph Curry's 6'3", and we act like he's tiny. It's like he's 5'6". So I'm going to quit rambling here. You have some experience with this. I know you can probably name several dozen people in our industry who also came into the business with their fathers in the business. I came in the business because of my father, but we never worked together. Thank God. So as this is unfolding here, just give me some of your perspective. What thoughts go through your mind?
You know, I think one of the things I was most thankful for my dad was always that concept of only if you have the desire to do it and the talents to do it.
Okay.
We're not putting this expectation on you that in order for this business to succeed long term, you've got to be a part of it and you're going to go to school and you're going to come here and do it. If you like it, great. If you don't, great. Mm-hmm. We'll be able to figure it out. And so the people that I've seen that, you hear the adage, first generation builds it, second generation grows it, third generation kills it. Like you just see that when there's that expectation a lot of times. And I know a lot of great third generation business and fourth generation business, and most of those are not this of saying he's the next
right.
professional NBA player that we're going to be on the same team. And Bronny, you better work your tail off. You better get to the right college. You better start. You better get drafted. GM's in the league. You better be looking at this kid. He's the one. He needs to become. And his name's Lebron James Jr. He goes by Bronny.
Right.
He's got no chance of impartiality in
right.
for the good and for the bad.
Right.
And so putting that level of expectation, not just on the kid, but on anybody who's in his atmosphere, really puts a lot of gravity around that whole situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't know, I'm thinking this is more sports than leadership, but I think it would be almost better if he goes to like the G League where, all right, yeah, you're going to make $200,000, but it's going to be a little bit more merit-based than, if he goes to Georgia, coach is like, what happens if he doesn't play well and he only plays 7 minutes? What do you think the questions are going to be in the press conference there? Bronny James only played 7 minutes, had 2 points, was 1 for 6. Tell me your thoughts. Yeah. And he's like, I got a whole team, right? How?
But we won the game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah.
Yes. Now, obviously, this happens a lot as well without fathers and sons or parents and children, where someone gets known as, I've seen it both ways. I've seen it more often the reverse, which is talented people start maybe as an intern, and then they work in the business for 10 years. Now, all of a sudden, they're 33, 34, and there are leaders that are like, oh, yeah, the kid's adorable. He's great. And you're like,
the guy from the mailroom.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Well, they don't see him for what he's become, and there's the reverse of that, which is somebody gets nominated as the golden child,
right,
has some early success in their early to mid 20s, and then 8 years later might not be showing the leadership or have the managerial skills, yet they have been kind of preordained, and everyone kind of knows that if you want to tick off the president, say Tommy's not ready for this.
Right.
So how, when talent and training development are so critical in our business, how can you coach leadership skills around talent identification and putting people in the right seats?
So there's that meritocracy piece that you've got to be able to say, hey, let's take names and titles off of this. Let's just look at what's happened. Let's look at the last 12 months, 18 months, 36 months. These are the things that have happened under this person's leadership, guidance, or if it's if it's numbers based, if it's a salesperson, this is what they've done over these last 36 months versus somebody else. How are you benchmarking and things like that? You got to be able to have like open, honest conversations and take titles off and be able to say, hey, we really have to evaluate where we are, which again, I mean, it goes back to that trust level as a leadership team. If you don't have that level of trust that you can't have open, honest conversations, then, you know, you're having people that are going to go into that straight into the political side of it, or the,
right.
I can't say anything in front of Bradley because if I say something bad about him, you know, about Tommy, then I'm putting myself at danger, right? So that level of politics, just it crushes the ability to have those true meritocracy type conversations about how are people really doing. And then I also think it's, how are you having those consistent touch points with these leaders to be able to say, hey, where are you struggling? This is where I see you need to improve. Like if you're not having those consistent touch points, and it's not the pat on the back every week like some people think about when you're leading, especially young leaders today, but it's more about, hey, this is going well. This is where I think you can improve. If you're doing that once a year, you're probably not doing it right. And if it gets so far down the line that this golden child is now in a bad spot where they've lost credibility, you've also not done a service to the leader.
Yeah. So if someone's listening, they're
not. Oh, sorry.
Millions,
this is your show. Our show now.
Millions and millions.
Millions.
This is Varsity Sports and Leadership with Jon Vaughan.
That's right. Yeah.
Segment one.
Segment one.
Of
two?
Of one, as far as you know. So someone's listening. They're in, maybe they got a small team, maybe they got a large team, maybe they have a small title, maybe the big title. They are thinking to themselves, if I'm being honest right now with myself, we do not have a culture where we can have open, honest conversation, dialogue, and debate. And you said, good thing. I'm going to give you one thing that you can do now to begin to improve that. Here's what it is. What would you say?
Starts with vulnerability from the top leader.
Okay.
You got to walk in and be like, I don't know it all. I need your help. I've messed things up. Because if you walk in and you're expecting, I can't go in and bring a problem to John. He either thinks he's right or he's usually right, or he handles all these things so well. I mean, he's not making mistakes that I'm making mistakes. Then they're not going to bring mistakes to you. But yeah. I messed up here. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I handled that poorly. You start with that. That's the first step in starting to build trust, is vulnerability. Now, if you're saying I screwed up every day, that's probably a different problem. But right. You got to bring those things to light.
Right. Jeff Saturday says, you know what? That's on me. We had a 31-point lead. That's on me. Then 2 weeks later, we had a 28-point lead. Now, again, that's something they're like,
that's on me.
It's always on you.
Yeah. It's like the guy in the pickup court that keeps going, my bad. Yeah, no, we know. We get it.
We're aware. The buck stops with me. Of course it does.
Yeah, yes, it does.
It's because you're the boss. All right. John, all right. Anything else here between Jeff Saturday and LeBron James as we shut this out? Any major theme to kind of leave us with here?
Yeah, so, I mean, I go back to something I said earlier. Like, if there was the one sentence, the one takeaway is the closer to the ground level that you are, the more important that tactical and technical acumen is. And make sure that you're assessing your teams and building that trust and as you go through that process.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I think it also, when you think about meeting with your team, sometimes we'll meet with young leaders or young managers and we will talk about the tactical aspects and the technical aspects vis-a-vis who else is on the team. And sometimes it's, I worked in the yard. Like, you worked in the yard for a summer when you were 17. Right. This guy's been out there for 34 years. So, all right, let's dig a little bit deeper. And sometimes you have to kind of force that humility a little bit. But sometimes it's just, hey, have you done the job? Do you understand the technical aspects of that? Sometimes there's a little gray area there as well. But all right, segment one, all time
in the books.
Varsity Sports and Leadership with Jon Vaughan.
I've been called, my initials are JV. I've been called JV my whole life. People have used it against me. I'm glad that we're calling this Varsity. Yeah, Thank you for not taking the easy shot, easy pot shot. You never would do that.
The idea that we would have called this JV Sports and Leadership never crossed
your mind.
Never. No,
Got it.
No. Yeah, and I certainly didn't text you as one of the options.
No.
I did not. No. All right. So we're going to bring this home. So thank you very much for listening. As always, if you enjoyed my conversation with Jon Vaughan, please go. We want to make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We are also on YouTube. If you're watching this video, you're already here. Congratulations. You're done. Also, Please rate and review these podcasts. Those mean more to us than you know. You remember who our sponsor was? Our proud sponsor?
Our proud sponsor.
Yeah, do you remember who it was?
I don't.
The Simple Sales Pipeline. Simple Sales Pipeline.
Yeah, no, that's what I was going to say.
Don't buy an expensive CRM.
No, that'd be 6 figures, takes 2 years to implement. See, I was paying attention.
You got it. Don't do that. No. 30 minutes per salesperson. We can quantify, organize, and value the sales pipeline.
Especially as we head into a soft environment. I listened.
Go on. Anyway, the Simple Sales Pipeline. You can learn more by Googling
Simple Sales Pipeline.
The Simple Sales Pipeline is the .com. That's all we've got. Thank you, as always, for listening. Your time and attention are valuable. Hopefully this was worth your time. You pulled away at least one thing. If you have ideas for future topics on Varsity Sports with Jon Vaughan or anything else or any other guests you'd like to see on the show, do not hesitate to reach out to me directly at bradley@bradleyhartmanandco.com. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. Get ready. You, my friend, are owed nothing.
Deliver value first.
Make it a great week.